Your Majesty, I accept the Nobel Prize for Peace at a moment when 22 million Negroes of the United States are engaged in a creative battle to end the long night of racial injustice.
On a snowy evening in Oslo, Norway, a 35-year-old preacher stood before the world, the youngest recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. accepted the honor with humility, dedicating it to the millions who fought for justice in the face of relentless oppression.
I accept this award on behalf of a civil rights movement which is moving with determination.
But who was this man, whose dream of equality would forever change the course of history? To understand the weight of this moment, we must journey back to where it all began.
Thank you.
Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia, into a world shackled by the chains of segregation. Raised in a loving, devoutly Christian family, young Martin's home was a sanctuary of faith and learning. His father, Martin Luther King Sr., a preacher, and his mother, Alberta Williams King, a skilled musician and educator, created a nurturing environment steeped in the values of dignity and respect for all people. But even as a child, Martin experienced the bitter sting of racism. A childhood friend's parents forbade their son from playing with him simply because of the color of his skin. This early encounter with prejudice deeply affected him, sparking questions about the fairness of the world and planting the seeds of a lifelong commitment to justice. King excelled in school, skipping grades and displaying an insatiable hunger for knowledge. His intellectual curiosity was matched only by his growing awareness of the societal injustices surrounding him. The Nobel Prize stood as a global acknowledgement of his unwavering dedication to nonviolence, a principle that had transformed his life and mission years earlier. It was during his profound engagement with the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi that Martin Luther King Jr. discovered a force stronger than oppression: the philosophy of nonviolent resistance. In Gandhi's legacy, King found not just a method, but a moral compass, a weapon of compassion and courage to dismantle injustice. This philosophy would become the bedrock of a movement that would forever change the fabric of America and inspire countless others across the globe. In December 1955, a quiet act of defiance by Rosa Parks set the stage for a transformative movement. Parks' arrest for refusing to give up her bus seat to a white passenger ignited the Montgomery Bus Boycott. The community needed a leader, and they found one in the young pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. King's the quality of delivering a clear, strong message and conviction galvanized the African American community. For 381 days, they boycotted the buses, walking miles to work and enduring harassment, violence, and arrests. Despite the hardships, their unity and resilience led to a landmark victory when the Supreme Court declared bus segregation unconstitutional. This victory was more than a legal triumph. It was proof that nonviolent resistance could challenge and dismantle systemic injustice. The Montgomery victory was just the beginning. As the civil rights movement gained momentum, King emerged as its most prominent leader. He co-founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, an organization dedicated to achieving civil rights through nonviolent means. In 1963, Birmingham, Alabama became a battleground for civil rights. King's leadership in the Birmingham campaign drew national attention to the brutal realities of segregation. Images of children being attacked by police dogs and fire hoses shocked the conscience of the nation. While imprisoned for his role in the protests, King wrote the Letter from Birmingham Jail, a powerful defense of nonviolent resistance and a searing critique of those who stood idly by in the face of injustice. Later that year, King stood before 250,000 people at the March on Washington. His speech, now immortalized as "I Have a Dream," articulated a vision of equality and harmony that resonated far beyond the steps of the Lincoln Memorial.
Freedom and justice, I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
The fight for civil rights was fraught with danger and sacrifice. In Selma, Alabama, peaceful marchers were met with brutal violence on Bloody Sunday. The images of this atrocity galvanized support for the movement and led to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. King's efforts also led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed segregation and discrimination in public spaces. These legislative victories marked significant progress, but King knew the struggle was far from over. In his later years, King expanded his focus to include economic inequality, speaking out against poverty and the Vietnam War. He believed that true equality could not exist without addressing the root causes of systemic oppression.
Vietnam in 1968, this must be an issue if that tragic war is still going on. And so
in 1968, King traveled to Memphis to support striking sanitation workers fighting for fair wages and better working conditions. Despite mounting threats to his life, he remained steadfast in his commitment to justice. On April 3, 1968, King delivered his final address, known as the "I've Been to the Mountaintop" speech.
Now, we've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop.
Reflecting on his own mortality, he declared, "I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land."
And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight.
The following day, on April 4, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated while standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. The fatal shot, fired by James Earl Ray, ended the life of a man who had dedicated himself to the cause of equality and justice. James Earl Ray was arrested 2 months later and convicted of King's murder, but controversy and conspiracy theories have long surrounded the case. Some believed Ray was a scapegoat in a larger plot involving government agencies or other groups opposed to King's activism. The assassination sent shockwaves across the nation, igniting riots in over 100 cities and prompting widespread mourning. King's death became a catalyst for renewed efforts to address the racial and economic inequalities he had fought so tirelessly to overcome. King's death was not the end of his dream. His legacy lives on in the countless individuals and movements inspired by his vision of equality and justice. From the halls of government to grassroots organizations, his message continues to guide the fight for human rights. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. taught us that change begins with courage and a vision of what the world can become. His life reminds us that even in the face of hate, hope can triumph, and love can build bridges where walls once stood. His dream was not just his own, it was a call to all of humanity. And though the journey continues, his legacy reminds us that the dream is alive as long as we believe, act, and stand together. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If this story inspired you, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share it with others, and subscribe to So Classic for more timeless stories that connect the past, present, and future.